This is the Floridaville. Get to know the people behind the Florida names you know. On this episode, we get to know Barney Bishop. We are recording remotely today rather than in our podcast recording studio. I'm Rosanna Catalano in my home in Tallahassee, and our guest today, Barney Bishop, is speaking to us from his den, I believe, in Tallahassee. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rosanna.
Barney, you are known in political circles as an outspoken advocate, but I know you have a long history of entrepreneurship. Tell us about the first business you ever started.
Well, I always wanted to be a lawyer, and I never ended up doing that. So when I graduated from college, I went back to a job that I had done the summer before. I went to school in Boston at the Orange County Legal Aid Society, and they needed an investigator, a staff investigator, somebody that would go down to the city jail back then in the 70s to interview inmates to see if they qualified for legal aid representation. So I did that for about a year or so, and then a law firm asked me to come work for them. And then I eventually became a private investigator. You have to work for somebody else for 3 years. And then I started my first company called TRAK, T-R-A-K Detective Agency in Orlando, and did mostly service of process, original process, but also did investigations as well in both Orange and Seminole County. And in 1979, I started lobbying for the Florida Association of Private Investigators. And then in 1980, I became their state president. And it's interesting because now, as a lobbyist in Tallahassee, I represent the Florida Association of Professional Investigators.
I love that. You have a long history with them. Now, I know that you took a leap into the public sector, I believe, after you left TRAK.
I did. I went to work for state government, and I did that because I have always been interested in politics. And so I went to work for Bill Gunner, who was at the time the state treasurer and insurance commissioner. And I was about to become the president of the Florida Young Democrats in 1984. I went to work for him in 1983. And I always thought that he would be governor one day, and I wanted to work for a governor. But every time he ran for governor, Rosanna, he ended up switching races to run for the U.S. Senate. And the first time he ran against Buddy McKay, and he beat Buddy in the primary, but the Democratic primary was so divisive that he couldn't win the general election, and he lost to Paula Hawkins. And then 2 years later, he came back, started running again for the U.S. Senate. He battled Buddy McKay again. Buddy McKay won, but Buddy McKay lost to Connie Mack III. So neither one of them ever became a United States senator. But I enjoyed my time in state government. I was there for just 4 years.
Now, you took a leap into fundraising too, and can you tell us about it?
Well, I did fundraising for political campaigns when I was a young Democrat. And then as I became older, got into the party itself. I got into fundraising, and you do that not only for political campaigns, but also did it for not-for-profit. So the Florida Association of Professional Investigators, private investigators that I represented, you have to fundraise that. You have to convince people to join the association. Then we created a political action committee, the first one ever for the profession. So you're fundraising all of that time and trying to get people to understand the importance of a not-for-profit in an association, a professional association, and what it can do for your industry or profession.
Now, were you also involved at all with the trial lawyers?
I was. After I worked for Bill Gunner for 4 years, I then was recruited and went over and worked for what was then called the Academy of Florida Trial Lawyers. Now it's known as the Florida Justice Association. And I worked for them for 4 years. And I had two absolutely wonderful mentors there. One was John Romano, a very distinguished attorney from Palm Beach County and West Palm Beach, who was president of the Academy back then. And he's been a mentor to me ever since I first met him in 1987. And then Marion Johnson, who is sort of my political mentor, because when I went to work for the Academy of Trial Lawyers, I was a pretty liberal Democrat, and Marion was a Republican. And I knew that. She never overtly tried to influence me, but just by being around her for 4 years, I eventually started becoming more conservative. And then once I left the Democratic Party, then I became even more conservative. But I remain a Democrat.
Now, I serve as the chair of the development committee for the Coca-Cola Scholars Foundation. Do you have any words of wisdom to share with me and others that do fundraising, for those of us on the front lines trying to raise money?
Sure. Well, I would say a couple of things. Number one, know exactly what your pitch is. And I wouldn't say that it necessarily needs to be an elevator pitch, which is about 30 seconds long, because you need a little bit longer than that. But your pitch needs to be only a couple of minutes. Number two, you need to be prepared for what kind of responses you're going to get back. And so you can have an immediate comeback because you don't want the conversation to end too quick. So if I'm interviewing you, Rosanna, to see if I could recruit you to be a fund giver so we could have a scholarship perhaps in your name, I might come in and ask you for $1,000. If you say yes right away, then my first realization is I made a mistake because I should have asked you for more money. You acceded to that too quickly. So the better thing to do is, if I think that you're willing to give $1,000, is to maybe start at $3,000, and you might say, I'm not really interested in that, and I might come back and say, how about $2,000? Is that something that you think that you could do? You might say, no, it's not really something that's within my budget right now. And then I might come back and say, well, how about $1,000? So it's better to go down in gradual steps than it is you can't go up. Once somebody says, that they accept your offer, you can't increase the offer after that. So it's better to start high and go low.
I like that advice. Now, after leaving the Florida Democratic Party, you then created two lobbying consulting firms and served as the CEO and president of Associated Industries of Florida, which, for those listeners that are unfamiliar with it, it's an association that advocates on behalf of businesses here in the Sunshine State. At what point in your career did you realize you were meant to be an advocate?
I think probably when I started my first lobbying firm, the Windsor Group, in 1993, after I left the party. It seemed to me, when I graduated from college, I got a degree in speech and communications, and I thought it was about the most worthless degree that you could get, along with maybe a physical education degree. But speech really turned out to be a strength of mine. I was a high school and college debater. And I went to college up in Boston on a debate scholarship. So that ability to see both sides of an issue, both the positive and the negative, because you have to debate a positive round and then a negative round, gives you the ability to see both sides of an argument. And if you're going to be a good advocate, you have to understand where your competition or your opposition is coming from. And you have to be prepared to use straw man arguments to say, look, this is, Senator, this is what Rosanna is going to tell you on this issue. But let me tell you why that answer sounds good, but really isn't going to refute what I'm trying to do. So as a result, you have to be prepared to do those things. And if I get my ear thing back in, so you have to be prepared to understand both sides of the issue. And that's when I realized that being a lobbyist was really something that I wanted to do.
Well, let's take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, I want to ask you about your board work and your childhood.
Sure.
At Rocket Ship Consultants, our mission is to take your organization to the next level. Our team develops strategic communication plans that help entrepreneurs, corporations, associations, and individuals reach new heights. Our consulting team is made up of attorneys with additional experience in journalism, public relations, politics, broadcasting, and advocacy. Let us help you take that dream you have for a podcast or video show and make it into a reality. We can create networking opportunities, educational forums, and interactive conferences to spread your message. Let our team provide you with fresh ideas and inspiration. Rocketship Consultants offers a variety of services, so check out our website at rocketshipconsultants.com. Take off with Rocketship Consultants and launch your organization with us. Welcome back. Our guest today is Barney Bishop, a well-known and outspoken advocate in our capital city. Barney, your list of civic accomplishments is pretty lengthy. I was looking at it and was very intimidated. You were appointed by Governor Lawton Chiles to the Florida Commission on Community Service and later became chair of the commission's direct service organization, the Volunteer Florida Foundation. You were appointed by then Florida State Treasurer and Insurance Commissioner Bill Nelson to the Florida Hurricane Catastrophic Fund Advisory Council and served for the first 6 years of its existence. And it's going to take me a little bit to go through this entire preface to my question. In 2003, you were appointed by Governor Jeb Bush to the Florida A&M University Board of Trustees. You also served on the City of Tallahassee Airport Advisory Committee, the Gubernatorial Fellows Program Board of Directors, the Florida Juvenile Justice Foundation, and the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. Which one of these positions do you think had its biggest impact on you?
That's a great question. I would say probably the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy, because when I left the Florida Commission on Community Service, and interestingly, I left because Governor Bush did not reappoint me after my term finished under Governor Chiles. It switched right at the time as Governor Bush was coming in, and I was vice chair. I was going to be chair of the commission, and Governor Bush didn't appoint me to it. But instead, he appointed me later on to the Florida A&M Board of Trustees, which I very much enjoyed and really had a good time at. But in the process, of course, Governor Bush, because of his mother, Barbara Bush, the First Lady, very famous, was involved in reading her entire life in literacy. So I got involved first in the Volunteer Florida Foundation, and then later with the Volunteer USA Foundation. And then eventually that morphed into the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. And I served as its first chair when we got the dollars from a local community fund in Washington, D.C. We got it donated back and created the Barbara Bush Fund. And so it's been a lot of exciting times working with children and with families on literacy issues. It's so important. We started working with children first, and then you quickly realize that you have to also help the parents as well, because in many instances, particularly if they're from another country or speak another language, they're using English as their second language, you have to help the parents as well to read and to be able to understand and comprehend, and then they can work successfully with their children. So that's been a passion of mine for the last 20 years. And I still serve on the Barbara Bush Foundation as the chairman of their investment committee for the last 8 years. So it's a lot of fun, and we have quarterly calls, and we're just trying to make sure that we do a good fiduciary responsibility of maintaining the corpus of that foundation funds. So we invest it very conservatively to make sure that we never are going to lose money as a result of our investment strategies in our portfolio.
Really important work. So which one of those organizations do you think you had the biggest impact on?
Well, probably an association that you didn't mention yet, and that's called the Florida Smart Justice Alliance. Back in 2005, Governor Charlie Crist wanted to build 21 new prisons in the state of Florida. And Florida at that time was having a difficult economic situation, not as bad as it is today, but pretty bad in relative terms. And I served on the board of Florida Tax Watch, and I asked Dominic Calabro to help me defeat it because Governor Crist didn't want to build with cash. He wanted to bond, and to build those prisons would have cost over $2 billion back in the early 2000s. And I was opposed to that. And with Dominic's help, we were able to kill it. But in the process of that, Roseanne, I realized that in the criminal justice arena, where I had been lobbying since I created the Windsor Group, because I represented behavioral health care providers, substance abuse, mental health, juvenile justice, adult corrections. I had learned a lot since 1993 about that profession and how that interacts and has a nexus with criminal activity. So as a result of that, I called in about 8 or 9 people to a lunch at the Doubletree Hotel in December of 2005 and said, look, we just defeated building all these prisons, but I'm in favor of incarcerating people that are violent and that are a danger to themselves or a danger to others. So I said, what we need to do is create an advocacy group of criminal justice reform, but do it from a center-right position on the conservative side, because why? We had a Republican House, we had a Republican Senate, we had a Republican governor, and we've had all of that since 2005. So anything that Smart Justice does, and we've passed 4 bills over the years, the first thing a Republican governor is going to do, Rosanna, is call up the Florida Sheriff's Association and the Prosecuting Attorneys Association and say, what do you think about this bill? Should it pass? So Smart Justice has always been in lockstep with the sheriffs and the state attorneys. And as a result, we've been able to advocate for some great reform, and we've been able to kill some, what we think are some pretty bad ideas.
That's great work. When I started my career, I worked in mental health court in the state attorney's office in Broward County. So
Yeah.
I've seen at least one aspect of some of the things that you were talking about. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the boards that you currently serve on. So tell me about them.
I started an organization called Citizens for Responsible Spending about 6 years ago, because the Tallahassee City Commission was talking about and actually was going to increase our property taxes, but they were unwilling to consider cutting expenses first so that you could mitigate how much property taxes would have to be increased. And they refused to do that, and that aggravated me. So I started a grassroots group. There was another group that already existed called Budget Hawks. And so we decided to create another organization, Citizens for Responsible Spending. And we worked with the Budget Hawks to try to convince the commission to do it. They needed to find $7 million. We actually proposed to them over $9 million worth of cuts that they could effectuate ahead of time, therefore not having to raise taxes. And in every instance, Rosanna, we didn't zero out a single line. We just took a little money from here, a little money there. And I learned that from the state legislature, because when Governor Bush was governor, we had some tough economic times as well. And the governor would ask every agency to do a 5% budget cut exercise and then a 10%. And that helped, because it gives you an opportunity to understand that the agency heads have to go back and realize what is their core mission. What are the things they have to do legislatively? What does the law say that the Department of Health and Human Services has to do? And then everything else is something you want to do. And the state and the city government needs to look at that budget in the same fashion. They need to look at what are the things that we have to do, and then what are the things that we want to do? And then the things that you want to do, you cut a little bit here and there. You don't zero anything out. But it means that by cutting expenses first, then if you do have to increase property taxes, you don't increase it by as much as you were originally going to. We lost the first year, but the second year that we came back when they wanted to do it again, we were successful in keeping them from doing that. And CRS has been very active on that and ethics issues, and on the recent Children's Services Council tax issue as well.
Are there any other boards that you're currently serve on?
Sure. I serve on the Economic Club of Florida board. I will be in 2021 the vice president, so I'll be president in 2022. So I'm really excited about the Economic Club, because we bring in world-class speakers on economic issues and issues of the day. Very distinguished forum, been around since 1977. So I'm really proud of my affiliation there. And I'm also going to be the president next year of the Committee of 99, which is a group of people that support law enforcement, so that when an officer goes down in the line of duty, We have dollars, that scholarship dollars. Well, first off, we have a bridge loan that we give to the spouse of the officer that has fallen to help them until insurance kicks in. And then we go out and we raise money to provide scholarships for the children of the surviving spouse, so they'll have an opportunity to go to community college. So I do that. I'm also the president of the Downtown Business Association of Tallahassee. I'll actually be stepping down. This is my second year as president. And because I've got some other boards that I'm on, so I can't stay on all the boards in a leadership position, but I'm really pleased what the Downtown Association, Business Association of Tallahassee has done.
You have many spinning plates.
I do, but I like to stay busy.
Good. Well, on this show, we like to discuss the entrepreneurial spirit, which is an attitude and approach to thinking that actively seeks out change rather than waiting to adapt to change. It's a mindset and that embraces, critical questioning, innovation, service, and continuous improvement. So tell us in what ways, if any, these qualities have shaped your career or life.
That's an interesting way to put it. I'd never thought about it exactly that fashion, but you're right. An entrepreneur is somebody that's always looking to change the status quo. And, the toughest thing to do, and this from your own lobbying experience, is to change the status quo, because nobody wants to change. Everybody likes just the way that it is. And particularly if you're in government, because you're comfortable with that, you know what to expect, you know what you got to do. So anytime you're trying to change the rules of the road, you're trying to change what the landscape is, it's always a difficult challenge, and people will resist that naturally. But the important thing to do is to try to understand how you can convince people that change is in their best interest. And that in our changing times, which are very evolving very quickly because of technology, of course, it's necessary to be up to speed on everything. Plus, we always have to think and understand that there's always better ways to do something that we may be doing now. And we may have to change the way that we do things because a court case has said the way that they do it now isn't appropriate or isn't constitutional. So you take those opportunities and you look at how can you change it? How can you change it best? Who's going to be on your side? Who will be your allies? Who's going to oppose you, so that you can understand, again, where they're coming from, because you're going to have to overcome their arguments if you're going to be successful in trying to be a change agent and improve our living, our laws, our environment, whatever the case may be.
That's a great answer. What projects are you currently focused on?
Governor Jeff Kottkamp and I partner together. We represent independent pharmacists. And right now we're battling the pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs. It's a very complicated subject. We spent a day and a half just getting immersed with the client from at the very beginning. And we had a big bill last year in the legislature. It was so big, so comprehensive. We called it the kitchen sink. We really did the bill just for fun. We had 5 other bills that we wanted to have filed, but we did the 6th bill to just kind of throw everything together, show our clients if you wanted everything, this is what the bill would look like. And unfortunately, a legislator got a hold of it and wanted to file it, and we couldn't convince her otherwise. But the bill never got heard in the House or the Senate. But we had other bills in the process, but we're coming back this year. And so we're excited about that. Governor Kottkamp and I also represent structural engineers who are trying to carve out a new sub-license for their industry, because structural engineers are different than transportation engineers or environmental engineers or mechanical engineers. So that's been real exciting, and we think we've got a good shot at getting that done this year. I represent the Economic Development Commission of Florida Space Coast, Brevard County. which is the most manufacturing-centric county in the state of Florida. Obviously, the industrial cluster of space aerospace is headquartered there. Manned space flight for America comes out of Cape Canaveral. So it's a huge high-tech hub. And of course, maybe we'll get the United States Space Force to be headquartered there as well. But we have a lot of companies in tech manufacturing jobs pay about 50% more than what the average salary is for a job in Florida. It's good benefits. And there's a ladder to it. The only thing, Rosanna, is that you have to convince the person and typically their parents, if they're younger kids, that it's good to work in a manufacturing facility, because it's the old thought of it's nasty, it's dirty, it's coal, so if you look at some of the high-tech facilities that are being built these days, for example, when I was at Associated Industries of Florida, I was invited down to the new regional headquarters for Embraer, a Brazilian airplane company that makes their jet bodies down in Brazil and then ships them up to Jacksonville and then brings them down by rail. When I went into the manufacturing facility, the entire floor of the manufacturing facility was white tile. Now, normally a guy wouldn't know anything about that or appreciate that, except that I had put white tile in our kitchen of our first home, and my wife told me, don't ever do that again because it shows every speck of dirt.
She is correct.
So I asked the CEO, I said, why would you build a manufacturing facility and have white tile? He says, so we can see every speck of dirt. High-tech manufacturing requires a very, very clean environment. So they wear covers over their shoes. They wear one-piece jumpsuits over their body. And so they're looking for every bit of that dirt. So high-tech is really a great job, and it's a growing field. And certainly space and aerospace is going to continue to be an industry that's going to be extremely important to Florida's economic future.
Exciting stuff you're working on. So, what advice would you give to someone that wants to get involved in politics and government?
Well, if you want to get involved in government, and I try to mentor and help a lot of young people that come to me, because 5 years from now I'll be calling up some government agency, and somebody will answer the phone. They'll say, hey, I need to speak to somebody. They'll say, who are you? And I'll tell them my name. And they'll say, oh, you helped me 5 years ago or something. So you never know when you help some young person where they might end up later on down in their career that could be beneficial for me as a lobbyist. But I would say the most important thing, if you want to work in government, is go get a job in government. And if you're interested in politics, I would suggest the legislative branch of government. But even the executive branch of government is extremely important. Because why? Because lobbying firms want to hire people who instructively and insightfully understand the legislative process. So when you go to work for a legislative committee, whether it's the House or the Senate, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, it really doesn't matter. If you understand how a bill is put together, you know who the staff is, and you decide to leave and go into the private sector, the reason why that the lobbying firm would hire you is because you know the people in that special committee and in that process, and you have the ability to help make things happen, which means getting an appointment, means getting an amendment, talking to staff, find out what they think about a bill. So if you want to work in government, go work for government, which is why I sold my detective agency in 1983 and moved to Tallahassee. And have been here ever since because I wanted to get into government. If you want to get into politics, go work as a volunteer in either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, because they're always looking for volunteers. And if you do a good job and you're hardworking, you show up on time and you're enthusiastic and you try to do the very best job that you possibly can, they'll find a job for you at the party. And typically then that happens over at government. And that's especially true of the Republicans. Some of the first things that the Republican elected officials do is go raid the Republican Party of Florida headquarters and get their staff to come work for them because they've had an opportunity to work for them during the campaign season.
Wonderful advice. So, we like to end our show with a little fun by asking all our guests the same 7 questions.
Okay.
What would people be surprised to know about you?
Um, they would be surprised to know that I love to hunt because I'm always dressed in a coat and tie and always properly dressed. So to be dressed in camouflage and have a hat and a gun in my hand would be pretty surprising for most people. The other thing I think is that most people, particularly because I'm so I advocate so much on my views, think of me as a Republican, even though I am a conservative Democrat. So when people are told that or learn that I used to be the executive director of the Florida Democratic Party, they're pretty shocked given what my views are of the Democratic Party. But I stay in the party, Rosanna, because I didn't leave the party left me. But more importantly, there's a lot of conservative Democrats like me in Florida and in the country. And we have a voice and a role to play. And it's not just the liberal side of the Democratic Party.
When you have guests in town, where is your favorite place to take them?
To the Governor's Club. And I used to be president of the Governor's Club about 10 years ago or so. So I really enjoy that. It's a great place. They know exactly what I want. I don't want anything green on my plate, no vegetables. The only thing green that I'll eat is a salad. They know I like extra ice in my drinks. And they know what kind of wine and drinks that I drink. So it's really nice going to a place where they know what you want and take good care of you.
So, for our listeners that are not familiar with the Governor's Club, I guess we should say it's in downtown Tallahassee and it's a private club that people
Yes,
belong to.
right.
What is the name of a book you recently read that you could not put down, or the name of a show you enjoyed binge watching?
I will tell you that probably my favorite show just recently is The Crown. I've always enjoyed British history, and my wife and I just started watching season 4. I know it's been out for a while, so we're a little bit late to doing that, but we had already watched the first 3 seasons of The Crown. But it's terribly exciting because I lived through a lot of that. Of course, when Queen Elizabeth became queen, I think in 1952, I was born in 51. Obviously, I didn't have any idea that. I was way too young. But as I grew up, I always admired the British monarchy and the way that England was run. And if you remember, my second company was called the Windsor Group, and Windsor is the family name for Queen Elizabeth. And so I've been to London a couple of times, and to Wales and to Scotland. Not Ireland yet, so I'm anxious to go there. But we really enjoy watching The Crown.
We enjoy it too. A great show.
Yeah.
Among your close family and friends, what are you best known for?
Strong opinions, not being politically correct, refusing to be politically correct probably would be a more appropriate way to put it. I love to talk politics. And I'm a student of history, so I read a lot of history, and I read a lot every day. I read the Wall Street Journal. I've probably been a subscriber to that for the last 20 years. So I read that every day. And despite the fact that I'm a conservative Democrat, I watch NBC News in the morning and in the evening. And then to calm down, I watch Fox News. So I try to work, Rosanna, to get both sides of every issue. So I understand where people are coming from.
If you have a nickname, who gave it to you?
You know, I really don't have a nickname. Well, I guess I did have a nickname in the family. My dad's name is Barney, but he wasn't Barney Sr., or he was just Barney Bishop. And so I was called Little Barney to distinguish when we were at family gatherings from my father.
If you knew you could not fail, what would you attempt?
To run for office. I always wanted to be a politician, but I think there are some things that I've done as a private investigator. And I live in Tallahassee, which is a very liberal bastion of Democrats. My brand of conservative, being a conservative Democrat probably isn't going to go over well in Tallahassee, but I would love to be an elected official. Always wanted to be, probably never will be, but it's been a lot of fun being involved behind the scenes with powerful people, helping them to pass an agenda of what they think is important and what's good for our society moving forward.
Never say never. You never know.
You never know.
What are the top 3 things you love about living in Florida?
Well, the top 3 things that I love about living in Tallahassee is, number 1, I get to go hunting. Number 2, I love the change of seasons. The only time I don't like Tallahassee, or Florida for that matter, is in the summertime. But in Tallahassee, we get a beautiful spring and not so cold winters in the last few years, but hopefully that's going to change and we'll get having some cold winters again. The fall is especially beautiful. And then I think the third thing that I love is government and Florida State football. So I'm a college football nut. I don't watch pro football. I love politics. I love government. So this is a great place for me to live. And I've convinced my wife to stay here. And so we've been here now in Tallahassee for 37 years.
Well, Barney, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been a lot of fun getting to know you, and I've enjoyed the question and answers. Hope it works out great.
I'm sure it will. Be sure to subscribe to the Floridaville on all your favorite podcast listening platforms. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. Visit our website, thefloridaville.com, to see some extras regarding this episode. Our audio editor for this podcast episode is Joy Tootle with Rocket Ship Consultants. If you're interested in sponsoring the Floridaville or would like to suggest a future guest, contact us through our website, thefloridaville.com. Thank you for tuning in.